Ivory Coast, a nation of nearly 30 million people, has seen its fair share of political turbulence. But nothing in recent memory compares to the tidal wave of outrage that swept across its streets in the past days. In a dramatic turn of events, more than 2 million Ivorians poured into cities and towns across the country, from the bustling streets of Abidjan to the rural heartlands, united under one rallying cry: "No more tyranny." The center of this storm is President Alassane Ouattara, a man who once rose to power on promises of stability, economic growth, and democratic governance. His early years in office were marked by optimism. International investors flocked to Ivory Coast, cocoa production surged, and the country was hailed as one of West Africa's fastest-growing economies. To many, Ouattara represented a new dawn after years of civil unrest and political division. But as time went on, the glow began to fade. Political opponents accused Ouattara of centralizing power, marginalizing dissenting voices, and bending the rules to secure his position. The breaking point came when the president, already in his third term, announced his bid for a fourth term, a move widely seen as a direct assault on Ivory Coast's constitution. The constitution, adopted in 2016, was designed to limit the presidency to 2 terms. But Ouattara and his allies argued that because the constitution had been rewritten during his tenure, his previous terms didn't count under the new rules. Critics saw this as a dangerous manipulation of democratic principles, the same tactic used by other African leaders to entrench themselves in power. It wasn't just the constitutional gymnastics that angered the people. Ouattara's government also moved to ban key opposition figures from running in the upcoming election. Former President Laurent Gbagbo, who remains a powerful political force despite years in exile and legal battles, was barred. Guillaume Soro, once an ally turned rival, was also sidelined by legal cases many believe were politically motivated. Even figures like Thiam, who could have rallied significant youth support, found themselves pushed out of the race. For millions of Ivorians, this was the last straw. The streets began to swell with protesters, first in the hundreds, then in the thousands, and finally in the millions. Men, women, and young people alike donned the national colors, waving flags and chanting for change. Placards read, "No to dictatorship," "Respect our Constitution," and "Ouattara must go." The atmosphere was electric. Drums pounded in the background, whistle blasts cut through the air, and the voices of an angry nation echoed through every street. Social media platforms were flooded with live streams, videos, and rallying calls, turning the protests into a global spectacle. Hashtags like Côte d'Ivoire debout, Ivory Coast rise up, trended across Twitter and Facebook, amplifying the voices of the people far beyond the country's borders. In the capital, Abidjan, the scene was almost surreal. Every major avenue was packed shoulder to shoulder with people. Aerial shots showed a sea of humanity stretching as far as the eye could see. Local reporters estimated that more than 2 million citizens were mobilized nationwide, an unprecedented figure in the country's history. What makes this moment so significant is not just the numbers, but the unity it represents. Ivory Coast, like many African nations, has long been divided along ethnic, political, and regional lines. Ouattara's stronghold has traditionally been in the north, while the opposition often found support in the south. But this protest movement transcended those divides. Northerners and Southerners, Christians and Muslims, urban dwellers and rural farmers all marched side by side. The protests, however, were not without risk. Security forces were deployed in large numbers, setting up roadblocks and dispersing crowds in certain areas. Reports began to surface of clashes between protesters and police, with tear gas filling the air in some neighborhoods. Human rights organizations have already raised concerns about possible excessive use of force, warning the government against repeating the mistakes of the past. And the past looms large over this moment. Ivory Coast's modern history is scarred by civil conflict, contested elections, and periods of political instability. The post-election crisis of 2010 to 2011, which pitted Ouattara against then-President Laurent Gbagbo, resulted in more than 3,000 deaths and deepened national divisions. For many, the current situation feels like déjà vu, a dangerous slide toward another cycle of violence. But this time, there is also a new energy. A generation of young Ivorians who grew up watching their country struggle through conflict is determined not to repeat history. These young voices are at the forefront of the protests, organizing rallies, sharing updates online, and insisting on peaceful resistance, at least for now. We are tired of promises, tired of lies. This is not about one man or one party. This is about the soul of our nation. Her words have been shared thousands of times, becoming a rallying cry for the movement. As day turns into night, the protests show no signs of slowing down. Makeshift camps have sprung up in city squares. Volunteers distribute food and water to weary demonstrators. Musicians perform revolutionary songs, and poets recite verses about freedom and unity. The air is charged with both hope and uncertainty. Internationally, the world is watching. France, Ivory Coast's former colonial power, has issued a cautious statement urging dialogue and restraint. ECOWAS, the West African regional bloc, has called for calm while reaffirming its commitment to democratic processes. Meanwhile, activists across Africa are expressing solidarity with the Ivorian people, seeing their struggle as part of a broader continental push against authoritarianism. In many ways, what is happening in Ivory Coast right now is not just a national crisis, it's part of a regional awakening. Across West Africa, citizens are demanding more from their leaders: transparency, accountability, and genuine democracy. The coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, while controversial, have emboldened people to challenge entrenched regimes. And in Ivory Coast, this spirit has found its own expression through massive, sustained protests. The spark has been lit. The question now is whether it will lead to meaningful change or plunge the nation back into the shadows of political turmoil. As night falls over Abidjan, the chants continue. From the rooftops, from the markets, from the alleyways, one message echoes above all others: Ouattara must go.